Let's get weird. Just kidding. I only wanted to do that because Jacob Loafman is on the podcast today, aka Loafy, and he's just a good guy. I've been following him for about a year after we found out about him from another photographer friend of mine, and I just love that he just keeps blazing the trail. I love photographers who are just living in their zone and sharing what they want to shoot and doing it authentically and going for it. And the dude is just creative. He even told me, he was like, Adam, I don't want to talk business. I want to talk creativity. And I was like, hell yes. So that episode is today and for you. But first I want to talk about one thing. Patreon. We have officially started putting more content into that. So if you're not familiar, Patreon is a member subscription network where basically you can support the podcast for super low cost, all that jazz, and we're going to exchange information, under the hood insights, and let Patreon subscribers manage the future of the Bearded Tog. And so guest suggestions, topics, we're going to do a frequently asked questions section again, where we can have all of the Patreons submit their questions and, you know, get those answered for you guys. And we're trying to give thorough answers for all those people. And I want you to sign up. You can do that by going to patreon.com/thebeardedtog. We've been sharing a ton of really good stuff. Recently, we shared an SEO explainer video to help you better your SEO, as well as how I call weddings. We're also releasing all the episodes, including this one, and announcements early, only to the Patreon first. So it's going to get there first, every announcement, workshops, etc. All that's going to go there first, and then you'll hear it every Wednesday when the episode drops at its scheduled time. So just wanted to let you guys know that we've been kind of slacking on the Patreon vibe, and that's my fault, but we are pushing again because it's really fun. We have some stuff we want to share, and I really want to get into it. We're going to share all kinds of stuff like editing a full wedding, everything, what to do when you have a bad client, like everything. But today is all about Jacob Loafman. He is the fisherman. He literally drives in his car, lives in his car, and shoots 15 to 20 weddings a year, emphasizing his goal of living the life he wants to live right now, which I think he does a great job at, and it's so cool. And dude's just fishing when he's not shooting. And so I wanted to talk to him all about that, all about creativity, and just how he fuels his inspirational muscles and gets going on creative things. So without any further ado, here's Jacob Loafman. Jacob, so good to have you on. I always ask, I've been starting this tradition in 2019 of asking my guest with just a random off-topic question, and just to mess them up. And so my question is, and people might think this is serious, how long have you been playing air guitar?
So honestly, it's been a big thing. So I think my first CD I ever owned was most definitely Sheryl Crow.
Is that the one with Soak Up the Sun on it?
Yeah, the one with like all her really poppy hits, like from, it was probably like 1997, 98, something like that. Yeah. But then I followed that CD up really solidly with Korn's first CD and then Gravity Kills, because Gravity Kills was a St. Louis band. And I think that's when I started, like, you know, we all have our little quirks and like little daydreams, even when we are like teenagers or even adults. And like, I still headbang in the mirror every morning after a shower and act like I'm the lead singer of Every Time I Die or something, you know?
Every Time I Die. So, that's so good.
So probably well over half my life for sure. I mean, it's just, you know, there's, you know, I know you're into some of the heavier stuff too. Yeah. I think we've chatted like on, I think it was Facebook Messenger. It was like, yeah, there's just something about it just gives you those music chills, you know. It's that innate feeling, and it's I mean, it's art is what it is, right? Yeah. Like, it's the same thing. Viewing a piece of art or reading a poem or seeing a movie you think's beautiful. It's the same exact kind of chills I get from playing air guitar.
I love it. Do you play any other instruments?
So yeah, my brother actually so I have one brother. He's 4 years older than me. So like when I was a freshman, he was a senior in high school. But when I was in about sixth grade, he wanted to learn how to play the drums, and, you know, typical teenager stuff. Like, he gave up after, you know, 5 weeks or something. So then I picked it up. So I'm actually I'm quite okay at the drums. Like I can jam out with musicians and stuff on drums. And I actually do play a little guitar, and now I'm messing around with some electronic ambient stuff with my MIDI keyboard, but it's all just kind of like soundscapey stuff, it's nothing. If anything, like the best way I could describe it, especially for the listeners here, is it would be like making ambient instrumental post rock type stuff for like slideshows. That's kind of what I go for when I make music these days.
That's awesome. I love that. Man. So I want to, before people turn this off and they're like, why did I even turn into this podcast? At least on my side, they're like, no, I actually really love Jacob's music history. So give me a little bit of rundown. I want to say, obviously now you've been kind of traveling, kind of, essentially like car camping and doing this kind of just traveling vibes. Like, tell me a little bit about that. And then, where did you start? What have you been doing full time recently? And then it sounds like recently, in the last year, a lot of things have changed for you.
Yeah. So the car camping thing's funny, right? Like in our industry, it's almost an aspiration for people now, like the camper van movement and stuff, which is awesome. But like to my normal friends and stuff, they're like, you're sleeping in your damn car. What's so cool about that? And I'm just like, you guys have no idea, like I'm saving at least even cheap hotel rooms. I'm saving $45 a night,
right?
And even if I want to stay at a campsite, like it's $10 or $15, like I just need to shower,
Yeah.
So yeah, I started doing that because I just, so it kind of ties into the loss of my dog. She passed away. She was about to be 10, we think, or 10, sorry. She was about to be 14, we think. So she passed away about this time last year. So any opportunity I got after that for travel, I told myself, okay, if you have the time, since you're self-employed, drive there instead of flying, so you can see more of the country. And so that's how that whole thing kind of started, honestly. And being American, most of us like road trips anyway. So old Florida beach vacations with our families when we leave our little bubbles, once a year for 5 days or whatever. But yeah, now I've kind of really started to enjoy it. And I think the main reason I enjoyed it is because while I love being social and meeting up with people and meeting new people and working with my clients, I really love being alone in the healthy way, like the quiet moments and being introspective. And I've really fallen in love with that the past couple of years. So yeah, like as far as the business side of things with traveling, like I just I started putting out the word, like where I'm going to be, and sometimes I'll book some family shoots. Like I just got back from LA and I booked a corporate headshot session. And it's just great, like I think that's kind of the breaking point of being self-employed, when you finally realize that we have this opportunity of being entrepreneurs, that we can wake up every morning and say, okay, my goal is to make $500 today. Like we have that, like we can do that. It's totally attainable. And most people in the regular working field, like they just go to their job,
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how I'm working these days. I just set myself small financial goals, like for the week most of the time.
That's incredible. I love that. It is funny too. Like you mentioned wanting to be, like how car camping was aspirational. And I literally just booked, I'm going back. So this is kind of weird. I have a weird relationship with Iceland, and it's a good relationship, but it's like, it's a country that I love. I proposed to my wife there. And since the first time I went, even though I've never photographed a couple there, like, which is kind of my main job, right, as a wedding photographer, it is,
sure,
it's just so addicting. I would say like Iceland is like a drug for me. And so I literally just booked my next flight back there, and I'm car camping. Like I'm going to sleep in the car and just do the ring road again. And
it's the best. Like people, it's Iceland is for sure one of those places where, like, being on the staff for Looks Like Film, like when I was still on Facebook, people would say, Iceland, I don't need to go there. I see too many photos. It's like, you only say that if you haven't been there. Like,
right.
It's as soon as you get there, there is this feeling of safety and comfort in that place that just, I don't know. It honestly reminds me of like old RPG video games where you had a whole world you could walk around in, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Like you don't really run into anyone. You don't. Yeah, it's just, so I totally get what you're saying. It's just a different camping experience overall, really.
Right, 100%. And it's, after being there, I've been a few times. It's trying to think of the way to say this. I've been in a bunch of seasons. I've been in all 4 seasons before, and it's so different and unpredictable. And it's a place.
Yeah.
It's like where it's a place where vacation is kind of difficult, which a lot of people don't take vacations like that. They're like, no, I want to relax and like eat a bunch of food, which is cool, but it's
right. Yeah.
You have to like track if it's going to snow or not. You know, if you go in the winter and you're just like, oh, I don't think we actually can make it there, and you're like, what?
Sure. Yeah, it like, I loved what you said about food too, because like my first time there, everybody's telling me like, you know, it's super expensive, blah blah blah, and it's like, look, I'm staying in like a Ford van with a mattress on top of plywood. Like, I'm not taking this trip to experience like food.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Like, I'll eat spaghetti every night. Like, it doesn't have to be expensive on those things.
Yeah, exactly.
I would rather spend the money to get into some of the attractions, and like it's just like anything in the world. Like it's the negative stuff seems to stick out more than the actual experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love it. So I want to kind of, now we got to talk practically. No. So you've been full-time photographer for about 4 years or so, I think you mentioned. And, you know, what do you primarily do? What's primarily bringing in income for you? And then you were based out of St. Louis. That was correct, right? That's like your main hub, if you will?
Yeah. So I'm based out of St. Louis, and it'll be 4 years this August.
Nice.
I always get like, I'm so good with so many other things, but with years, like I messed up. But yeah, it'll be, because it's 2019. Oh my God. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it'll be 4 years this August, I believe.
That's awesome.
But yeah, as far as the business goes, like my main income is definitely still weddings. But since I'm always evolving with my work, like it's a main goal of mine. So I never, even the first year I started, I didn't want to book even 25 weddings. My goal is always between like 15 and 20. And I do that because I wanted to find clients that hire me strictly for the work that I show, rather than just kind of looking at me as another vendor, right?
Yeah.
And that's not like, that's just for me. Like I only show like mainly artwork and stuff, and that's what it's the age old saying in our industry, like show what you want to shoot. So all of my clients the past 3 years, pretty much since I've been full time, I guess, have hired me for those movie poster creative shots, or the more non-trendy edits or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what I go for. And now I'm starting to focus on some passive income channels, where I've always been the type where I'm like artist first and then a business owner. And then it hit me, I don't know, probably this time last year, where I'm kind of like, oh shit, I own a business. Like I need to think about that a little more,
Sure.
Rather than just, pulling out my camera bag and making photos all the time for no income.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I've started selling products to photographers, but before I launch them, I make sure they have value, right?
Yeah.
And that was always like a big hump for me, because it's this weird thing, like anything in the consumer market, we as humans, we always think of ourselves first in that situation. So it's like, would I spend that amount of money on that thing? And it's like, when you're a business owner, that's not the question you need to be asking. It's like, how much time did you spend on this? What is the value you put into this product?
Right.
So it's just that's where I've always been at probably the past 2 years, with products and workshops and stuff. Cause it's just one of those hard things that's, especially if you've never been out on your own before, it's a really weird concept to kind of grasp. But I feel like I'm getting over that hump to where it's, I mean, let's just put it plain and simple, right? Like I spend money on stuff that is like completely useless to me even 2 months later. And I'm like, why the hell did I buy that?
Yeah. No.
You know, I mean, that's just how the consumer market works. It's like we all spend money and then like we'll be like, what did I buy that for? So that's not even talking about my products specifically, right? Like I'm proud of my products, but like anything that we put up for sale under our name, like there are going to be people that buy it and they're like, oh, this doesn't work with my stuff. And like, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to feel bad about that. Like they took, you know, they made the choice to spend the money on it. And yeah, that's a battle I'm always in my own head with, because I don't want to turn into one of these photographers. It's just like I don't want my Instagram account to turn into a store. You know, like this is all so much more to me than just, just editing products or something.
Right.
Like I do that because, you know, a lot of people asked for it. So,
right.
So went off on a little tangent there, but this is the stuff that's always bouncing around in my head, like a little ball bearing or something.
Nothing wrong with tangents. It's one of those things too, that I think, when I think about you and kind of what you just mentioned, there is a tension, right, between artist and business owner, and I flipped back and forth. You know, certainly, I think before I got married, I was very much full on the artist side, and then I think getting married, I like switched, and I've been business for the past like 2-3 years, and now I'm like, oh, can I switch back? Or hey, can I just change the ratio, if you will? You know what I'm saying? And
right,
like we talked about in the pre-show, we talked about Tave and how we both use that, and it's we use this thing, you know, this client management system, and I've talked about it before on the show, but it's like we use that so that we can spend less time not shooting. You know, we want to spend the maximum time doing whatever it is we like, right? So for you, it's like fishing and photographing. For me, it's photographing, riding my motorcycle, pretending like I go to the gym often. That's it.
Yeah. And I could share with the gym one. Yeah. I have a membership I paid for 8 years and been 8 times, you know.
8 years. Oh my gosh. And, you know, I think that is like the beauty of being a business owner in general, is like, no, like you have that freedom, or I don't want to spend too much time doing these things that, you know, now, even you, right? Like both of us have been full time for almost, I think, the same amount. Almost, I went full time in 2015 as well. So what up?
Okay.
You know, but it's you know, even if you did 20 weddings a year for 4 years, that's 80 weddings. There's a lot of repetition in there that you can like systematize and kind of you make it smaller and easier to do, so that there's more time for Jacob. And you know, that's not just shooting. That's, hey, let's go to movies. Let's do this. I want to ask you, so I heard about you through Devin and Catherine Robinson, Anchor and Veil. They said,
love that.
We had them on the podcast and they mentioned your workshop, and they're like, yeah, I went to this guy, Jacob Loafman's workshop, and, you know, and then we just learned how to shoot all weird, and, you know, it was a challenge and it was amazing. And I was like, oh, well, like I always, you know, try and follow the trail after an episode. I'm just like, oh, who did they mention? Let me go check them out, see what's up. And for you, I've been like following you, I think, for a year or so, and I've just loved the work. Do you still do workshops, or have you kind of put that on pause right now as you're kind of traveling and figuring stuff out?
Yeah, so I'm still I'm actually like working on a new workshop, like just a 1-day workshop with me, maybe a 2-day, because my, you know, like I mentioned a little while ago, like it's my number one goal is to always challenge myself and push myself to evolve, right? Like I haven't had a creative rut in about 2 years because I'm always doing these personal projects. And while I know I'm privileged to have the time to do that because I'm a single guy, no family, like I have all the time in the world to go make photos and make these projects.
Yeah.
But these are the ones, like I made one called The Red that kind of caught fire a little bit and caught people's attention. And my sport series I'm working on, like these are the things that I notice people are really reaching out to me about. And these are the things that over the past 2 years, I've become really knowledgeable and speaking about and confident about. So yeah, I'm kind of workshopping this workshop, if you will. that's kind of like almost like a film director's workshop where you can make these where you create your own universe with characters and you write the stories with it. And just, yeah, because it's just such a fun thing for me. Like even I style every shoot. So I'll go to the thrift store, with a $10 bill, pick out an outfit and a prop, and then give that character a name and just see who wants to model for it, because it's not anything I'm monetizing,
Right.
that work. I'm not monetizing any of that, but it's what keeps my imagination growing. So that's kind of what I'm working on now.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you, I think you mentioned somewhere either on social media, what, I want to talk about that one thing, how you went to our good friend Sam Hurd's workshop, right?
Yeah. His was the first workshop that I attended, and like his, obviously Sam's a really brilliant artist, and his workshop is just so structured and informative and great. But I went to his workshop in Chicago my first year, so it was 2015, yeah. And I went to his workshop, and the main thing I walked away with, which I love, and he still talks about this, is like, blaze your own trail, be on your own path. Don't worry about what other people think of your work, and all of those things really stuck with me.
Yeah. It seemed like
so I'm forever grateful to him and in debt to him for just sticking that thorn in my brain, because it's still stuck in there, and it's great.
Yeah. Do you feel like after that, maybe since then, there's something about people that, you said you haven't had like a real creative rut, which is amazing, right? So, but even people who maybe just have less of them, and then we'll include people like you who maybe they don't have any, for an extended period of time. Do you think Sam, going to his workshop, maybe that was it for you, like helped just give you permission to be you? And then, I want to talk about like, what does that look like for you? I know you mentioned practicality, like you go to the thrift shop, you're like, all right, we're going to develop a character, but like, what does that look like? Do you feel it? It's the end of the month, you've only shot weddings, and you're like, yeah, I'm dying creatively. Like, I haven't seen any movies. What am I doing? Right. And then you put something together. Like, how does that process work mentally? Like, what are the feelings that cause you to do it? And then how do you actually execute it? Is there any work that you make in that situation, and then you say, you know what, it's not good enough, or it didn't work out, and I don't want to show it?
Oh yeah, like to answer that last question, like yeah, all the time. I think that's with anything, like just as a human being on this earth, like it's all about the try, right? You have to, we hear all these great motivational speeches about failures and how a lot of successful people and artists have gone through tons of failures before they've reached their breaking point or their milestone or whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, even at weddings, like I'll try some double exposures and, it'll end up looking like a 4-headed monster or something. And I'm just like, I'm never going to show that to anyone. But I've made a lot of my favorite portraits from those errors that I made. Because when I make those errors and I look at the back of the camera, I'm like, okay, like nowadays, the past 2 years, like those kind of insert themselves into your subconscious, right? Like there's like a little box back there where you store all these past ideas that you tried and failed at. And you can bring them back up through your imagination when you're in the right parameters for that shot. You're like, oh, I'm going to try that at this wedding because the lighting works better here, the shadows are darker, whatever it is. So yeah, like I've made so many mistakes. And with the personal projects, like it really is just that most definitely a feeling. And it's not even like, I used to think it was boredom, right? But it's not boredom. Like now it's definitely a feeling in my belly of like, I just need to create something. And I used to do a bunch of projects where I'd never show anyone. But now I feel like it's my duty to share, to express ourselves to the world, to express our work, to show people who we are. So I'm starting to figure that out. because I think that's what all the great artists do, right? Like it's an expression of themselves in some way, and they don't even have to explain it to anyone if you don't want to. You don't owe anyone an explanation, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm always creating for myself first, all the time, because it just fills up that feeling, that innate feeling we talked about at the start. When you hear a beautiful poem or a beautiful song or see a beautiful film, it's just that tingly feeling. And when it's your own work, there's a bit of pride that goes with it, right? So yeah, I'm always chasing that. I'm always chasing that desire to fill that void of needing to create something.
Right. Do you feel like, are you able, because you're kind of in the groove, are you able to get that at weddings, or, you know, does one kind of like supplement the other? Like you'll have a wedding and you're like, I don't feel like I did everything I could have possibly done yesterday. It's time for a personal project, or vice versa, or both?
No, so they're pretty, like, especially my recent personal projects, like the past year, weddings I've kind of separated mentally from. So I shoot weddings kind of like I am a film director and the screenwriter and the director of photography. The story is being written throughout the day, and then when it comes to portraits, those are the movie posters you see hanging outside the theater. So that's how I shoot weddings, and that's why I've never been burnt out on weddings, because every wedding is a different story with their own characters, with their own main actors and actresses in it. And so yeah, like that's completely separate. That's like a separate creative cup from my personal work these days, for sure.
No, that makes sense. I like that. Like the portraits, you know, that's what I think people don't understand. And I get to talk to so many different photographers on this podcast who's, if you looked at just their Instagram feed, you would only think they shot a certain thing, right? So for like our good friend Benj Heisch, he's only shooting very hip bearded couples on mountains. And we're like, oh yeah, that's the life. And we're, for Jacob or for Sam, we're like, oh, we're only shooting cool ass portraits, you know, in a weird way, and we're trying to innovate from a technical perspective. And you know, it's like, and then there are other photographers doing different things, but at the same time, I think what you just mentioned too about like you love the whole day, but you also, maybe you have an affinity just for the movie poster, essentially, where you're like, you know, that's something special about making something epic and saying, all right, this is what's going to make people want to go look further into what's happening.
Right, exactly. And it's like, it's not when it comes to the portraits that I'm ignoring the story of their day, right? Like that's why I kind of set up those boundaries of how to explain it to my clients during a consultation. Like, how do I shoot? It's even in my pricing guide, like how I work. And I just explain what I just told you. Because I want them to look like, of course I capture moments, like, and those are going to be the most important photos we ever take, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the definition of the importance of photographs. Like those are the ones that get printed and stuff. But that's not mutually exclusive with creating some portraits for your clients, where if they hang one of those photos above the bed, like they get to look at that and say, you know, like what I always go for, and I tell them this in consultations, like I want you guys to look at like one of these portraits that I make of you and say, holy shit, that's us.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I want to go for that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that is, you know, because if I put myself in their shoes, like, oh, of course I would want a feeling like that.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I think that's so good, because I think people look at those photographers like we mentioned and you guys, and they say, oh, I bet Jacob doesn't shoot, you know, receptions or doesn't shoot normal stuff. But like on your feed, especially recently, it's like you've got a couple just walking down the aisle looking happy. Nothing wrong with that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because it's like, you know, even like it's absolutely wrong if you show up to a wedding and you're just shooting for the portraits to go on your feed. Like that's, not only is it not right, but it's actually like, that's really weird. It's almost like you're not there. Like we're accepting thousands of dollars from people to do a specific job, you know, and it's a really important job because we're providing them with a product that's literally the only thing they walk away with after the wedding night is done. So yeah, like I, especially lately, I've been sharing more moments, I try to scatter them in there because, I love old street photography books just as much as the next photographer. Like that stuff's just as incredible to me as like a creative portrait that I see.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I want to ask, so like, especially because I feel like you're really in touch with us right now, and this might be a loaded question, but like, to you, what is creativity? Like, what does that mean to you, and what does that work like for you?
Yeah, so that's
it's a toughie.
Yeah, but so I heard this on a podcast. It's a podcast called Your Art Sucks. And it's this great podcast that kind of digs into different stories throughout all of the arts world. So all of the different mediums and stuff that have existed throughout the past couple centuries. And one of them was his name's Sol LeWitt, and he got a letter from her name is Eva Hesse, and she was a painter, and she was struggling with self-doubt and her creativity. She was burnt out, and this was back in the 60s, 70s, because they were exchanging letters, right? And he wrote her this brilliant letter that it's just this most brilliant thing. And like I share it in all my workshops now. There's a YouTube video where an actor is reading the letter. And in this letter, he said, like, in a short format, he pretty much said, like, stop thinking so much and just create. Like, we all get caught in our own heads so many times, like whether, especially in nowadays, like whether you're trying to impress other photographers that exist on this little cell phone app where you post square photos and people will double tap your photo and maybe look at it for 2 seconds and they're on to the next photo. You think about how they're going to receive it, or you're thinking about, should I have pulled the tint a bit more toward the green end, or should I, like, all that stuff is just it's such a waste of energy when you think about the grand scheme of things. Because when we're creating photographs or any type of work of art, for me, it always goes back to that feeling, right? Even if it's a photo of a moment, like you're not looking at if there's a water bottle in the background, like you're literally the only person that even would notice that if it's a moment of a father that's hugging his daughter that he just saw for the first time, all dressed up, on her wedding day. Like you're going to be the only one looking at that bottle of water. So when it comes to personal work, like all these personal projects I'm doing, like it's just to create. It's just to be a kid again, running around on the playground with no creative thinking involved at all. No critical thinking. No, you're just free and running around. That's the feeling I think is what creativity actually is. It's to play, right? Like it's to play like a kid. Like I had the past 3 years with client work. Like when I show up to a wedding, I show up with my gear and just play. And there's really no better way to describe it for me. Like I grew up looking at, like I'm sure you did, like you look through your photos your parents would print off at the drugstore, little 4x6 photos. And, I would look through those boxes of photos when I was a kid, and I still do today. And just those snapshots, there's a feeling to them. And it's this unknown feeling that's almost indescribable, right? But you feel like you know what it felt like, this out of focus shot of a kid running through a grass field with a light leak on the left side. Like you don't know why it's so interesting, but it's just interesting. So yeah, like that's kind of the depths that I go to with creativity, is I just want to create interesting work. And I want it to be interesting to me first.
Right. No, do you think I want to kind of dive into this, and I always ask these questions, partially from where I'm at, and then partially what I think people want to know, is essentially, what about Jacob? Like, what does Jacob think about this? And
sure.
even for these personal projects, you know, like I feel like maybe you folks who went to college or maybe took a photo class, or like, try shooting everything at f16, which is valid, right? It's a valid like exercise to mess around with.
Sure.
Do you care less about that when you're trying to do these personal projects, and you're still like, hey, the tool and my relationship to that is different versus what is the relationship to you and what's in front of the lens? Like, or is it both? Like, do you have a decision which way?
No, like honestly, the only time I think about, like, actually a lot of my personal projects, like on my Lofi Instagram account, like those were shot at high aperture because I wanted to challenge myself and shoot at f8 and above in really high light and harsh light.
Yeah.
Because there's this really painterly texture that goes with that. But like, other than that, like, my camera gear these days is just like stuff I hold in my hands. Like, I don't think about it any more than that anymore. Like,
right.
I haven't acquired new gear like in a couple of years. I'm over the whole gas thing. And I think everybody goes through that, right? Like, I think that's when you get to a point where you realize, like, yeah, you'll make a technical decision on what lens you want to use to get this field of view. But other than that, like, that's about as far as I take it. Like, my camera is just this black blob that I hold in my hands to capture the vision that I'm seeing, the feeling that I want to try to capture, or this scene that I want to capture. That's about as far as I take it, man. Because I think if you get too caught up in like, oh, should I have shot this at f16 or should I have shot this at f2 instead of f2.8? I mean, you could sit there and question that stuff about our photos all day. And it's just, again, it's just a waste of energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I view critique the same way. Like, if I ask for specific critique on some of my work, then that's fine. Like, I have to expect that some people aren't going to like it, but like, as a deathbed question, like, I don't really care if I post a photo and it gets 11 likes or it gets 1,000. Like, I don't, that's not why I'm sharing it.
Yeah.
Like, I share photos these days to hopefully inspire other people to create what they want, but also to give them a feeling. Because if I post a photo of a moment or anything and it gets one person to think about, you know, a moment in their past, or if I post a photo of a certain color that reminds them of one of their grandparents' homes or something, like, that's something. And that's all that's important to me. I don't, like, Instagram could disappear tomorrow and I could give a shit. I don't care.
Right. No,
at all.
It makes sense. I love that. It's one of those things too. I think people, you know, I need to hear this. People need to hear this from you. Is the same way that you heard from Sam, is like permission to get weird and just try and make something that's for you. And for some people, maybe it doesn't look too far off of what they normally shoot, and maybe they just have a little bit more control, or they were able to like pick out the flowers, right? And that resonates with them.
Right.
And then like for you, you're like, no, I want a shirtless dude with a panda head. And
yeah, exactly. And like that was one of our Looks Like Film workshops. And like, that was my live shoot. Like, I found props like at the studio we rented.
Yeah.
And that was Danny Sprague, shirtless, wearing a panda mask and ironing clothes. And people, after I did my shoot, I was just like, I made 6 photos, and I was like, that's all I'm going for, guys. Just like 6 to 10 photos of some weird, doesn't even have to be a story. It's just something.
Right.
And then I just told them, like, okay, it's your turn. You each get 4 minutes to make 4 photos. Like, it can be whatever you want, but he has to wear the panda mask and his shirt has to stay off. Like, and they just played like kids. There was so much laughter. There was so much, and I think that helps remove our minds from this pressure that we put on ourselves within the industry to make sure we stay on trend, or that like what hashtags we use. And instead you're just making photographs to make photographs. Like, that's, I really think that that's what all the greats have done and will continue to do. There's a great book called Free Play in the Creative World. I think that's what it's called. but it's by an author, and he's a musician. His name's Steven Nekmanovich. And it's this beautiful book where he goes and interviews artists from all kinds of different mediums. And one painter said that one of his old professors at university told him, when you look at all the great painters, they didn't storyboard out their painting and their idea and they just sat down at a canvas and started painting. And it's just like, yeah, like that's it, right?
Right.
Like that's it. It's just, if you start to storyboard things and like execute this perfect vision you have for this wedding day or something, it's just like that's not how it works. Like you're gonna create this unneeded pressure and stress on yourself instead of just showing up and being a free creative person.
Yeah.
With the medium of your choosing. And that's what I always go for, and that's why I listen to a lot of books and podcasts and watch YouTube videos on talks about art. And that's one of the age-old questions that'll never have a right answer, because it doesn't really need an answer of what is art, what constitutes art, what defines it. I'm not defined by my work. It's just something I really enjoy doing and I seem to excel at. So
yeah. No, I think it's interesting because I think the tension, at least for me, right? Like, so somebody who's been in the business for 4 years full time and then, was in business for 3 years overlapping before, there's a sense of, and maybe that's the difference between what you do, and obviously that line is very similar, right? Like people do style shoots all the time, but that's for the sake of promoting an ideal that hypothetically they will bring them more business, right? We're trying to inspire something different, right? Like LeBron James and Michael Jordan play differently, and different kids want to be like different ones, right? And now kids want to shoot threes like Steph Curry, and maybe these sports references are getting weird, but it's one of those things where, even for me, like I shot my second one. I shot Boudoir. And the first one was literally, I had a bride ask me, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, so people are probably tired of hearing this, but the goal was so, it cleared up so many hesitations for me. So one, my wife was like, hey, that's your job. Go do it. Two, it was a bride who was like, Adam, we feel really comfortable with you. And I usually just referred it out. One, because I never shot it. I didn't think I was good at it, right? And I had this freedom of, hey, I want to make some work out of this that is, one, just makes her feel awesome, which is great. And that's like my company mission in general, is to eliminate fear. That's like my main goal in life. And, and then two, I like her fiance. I'm like, hey, well, maybe we'll make something that makes you happy, like physically, mentally, emotionally, and brings you closer to this person you care about, right? And and so it was cool. It was very freeing, and I did it for free. And I told the bride, I was like, yeah, you don't have to pay for anything. Just do your makeup, and we can pick out outfits. We can figure something out. And I finally, just now, like earlier this weekend, I did my second one, right? And it wasn't a bride. It was like just a friend that I knew on Instagram, which is kind of scary at first. I was like, oh, I don't have that. I don't have that that rapport. Yeah. Whereas like even you and I were like, hey, yeah, take my photo in front of this mountain, man. Like, oh, we've got a little bit of joshing nature. And literally this person I'd never spoken with in person. And that created like new boundaries and tensions that were really fun. And the reality, I was like, one, I don't have to ever show anybody this work if I don't want to. Two, I made this for me. And then three, there's something about, and I had to walk through this when I did the first one, there's something about shooting something that makes you feel nervous or weird. And for some people that's boudoir, for some people that's wedding. They're like, oh, I could never shoot a wedding. That sounds terrifying. And I'm like, well, you should walk into that. You should explore that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, not even just with creating photos, like anything in life that makes you feel uncomfortable or challenges you is usually a good thing. Yeah. Because it provokes at least a thought, or a feeling. Right. And that's, there are certain situations where it can be a really terrible thing, but most of the time, like all the major changes in the world have come from people feeling uncomfortable and then accepting whatever that uncomfortableness was because they figured it out and understood it. And it's the same thing with creating, you know, the outside of the box and get out of your comfort zone. And it's just a deep thinking industry we're in. And I happen to love it, like, because that's how I've always been anyway.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's like you haven't given up. Like, I think there was a saying, or even statistically, that like children are born creative, but then that part of them dies every year, a little bit by little, and you get a chance to kind of like, you're keeping that alive. And I want to ask you. And your goal isn't the business end, right? Like, that is a byproduct of what you're already making, which is like a best case scenario. Like, that's awesome. People are booking you for who you are and what you'll create versus just what you'll create and what they want. You know, it's like this.
Right.
I want to ask, like, when you're doing these, when you're trying to exercise a creative muscle, which I feel like is a big theme of what we've been talking about. How weird is too weird, right? So like, you did like, you've done, I loved your tennis shoot. I've loved the panda one, obviously. But then you had one where it was just like a nice girl and a straw hat, you know, and just like 3 photos that looked really pretty. And I don't want to say just, sorry, but it juxtaposed to those other ones, that one might look the most quote unquote normal. And I want to know, does it ever feel, so you're making this, and I think there's, and maybe you do feel this and you chase after this feeling, but it is like, oh, am I just doing this to be weird? Or you're like, no, I want to try and push past what I think I'm already trying to do. Sorry, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And so that, like, I'm at the stage where I don't feel like anything's too weird these days, because I feel like until we do push ourselves to that point where we have created a photo that we were like, you know, the idea was great, but the execution this time was poor. But like my first 2 years, I would still share those photos, and I look back at them now and I'm like, oh my God, why did I ever share that? But if I wouldn't have done that, where would I be today? You know what I mean? That pushes that creative muscle to flex a bit more, because you did take that risk to try out that shot or to try out that session or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because if we don't work on flexing those creative muscles, then we just, you're never going to get ahead, right? Like you're never going to get past this point of constantly questioning what you're even creating for.
Yeah.
So nowadays, like, the one with the straw hat and the water, like that was, I tell people all the time, like, some of my loafy stuff is super weird, and some of it is just literally like, I enjoyed the colors. Like the way the colors look together.
Yeah.
That was at a lake in Arizona, and like her skin complexion and the tan of the hat and her tan dress, I was just like, man, it looks good up against that water.
Right.
And like, that was interesting enough for me, you know?
Yeah. You're like, complementary colors, blue and orange. I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah. Like, exactly. Like sometimes, you know, less is more is a saying for a reason. And, you know, some of the most beautiful films out there were shot very simply, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's this huge range of, you can go with very minimal, simple stuff, and that could be just as interesting as this crazy ass portrait you make the following week.
Right.
There doesn't have to be a standard, I don't think. At least not in my mind. There's never going to be a standard. I'm always going to be pushing myself, and that's why I have like 4 set challenges that I challenge myself once a month. And like, it can be a color challenge where it's just like we just talked about, complementary colors and, or non-complementary colors, and seeing how that turns out. Or I'll choose a song and I'll try to create photos for how that song makes me feel. You know, a prop challenge where I have to make 10 photos and this prop has to be used in every single one of the photos. You know, I think that's how you do keep growing those creative muscles, is by challenging yourself. I don't really see any other way to grow.
Yeah, no, dude, I love that. It's like I'm trying to think about this, but literally, working your creative muscle makes you feel more comfortable in doing it anyway. And so now, like you just described essentially like your normal workout routine. You're like, yeah, like every month this is what I'm kind of going through. And it's like, you know, the analogy is for me 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I felt uncomfortable being back in the gym. I'm like, I don't belong here. Do I have good form? I don't really know what I'm doing. And then now it's like, I feel very confident in there, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm not the best in this room. I don't care about that, but I'm here for me, and like I know I'm more in touch with my body, my physical self, whatever. Both my strengths and like what I can do, and my weaknesses, and you know, just all kinds of things, and the approach to like new exercises. Like I told my trainer, I'm like, I'll try anything once, and like if we feel like it hurts or we feel like it's not good or whatever, you know, it's going to take practice, and I really love it now, and I feel so. This is kind of a personal thing, but like the safest place I feel in life right now is at the gym, which is a weird thing for me.
Okay, yeah, that's great though.
Right? Yeah, like the most welcome place, the place where I feel most like I'm doing a decent job, is at the gym, and I'm like, all right, well, at least I'm one of those people now where I can like hit it, and trying to get rid of this belly that I've had since I was in, you know, 5th grade. So
I hear you on that, man. But like it's just like you said, the gym analogy, right? Like the simple fact and reason and logic points to, if you wouldn't have gone back in 6 to 8 months ago, guess where you'd be at today?
Yeah.
Exactly where you were 6 to 8 months ago. So it's like that's just logic.
Right.
It's just logical. If you don't ever take that first step, like you're never going to get anywhere. I mean, that's just
I wonder
just how it works.
I just thought of this too, is like we just said, if I hadn't gone 6 to 8 months ago, I'd be in the same spot or worse. And so that made me just come up with this, and I think you've touched upon it in a different, saying it a different way, but like stagnation is the slippery slope versus creativity is work uphill, you know? And so it's like, if you stay, you're going to go back, but if you try, you'll at least keep going forward, even if it's slow. And, you know, that's important, right? Like you can't just stay.
Yeah. Cause even when I got asked the questions, like when I did experience creative ruts, people were like, you know, how did you get out of them? And I said, you know, I tried taking a break once, and the following year I just kept shooting through it. Even if I thought that everything I created was crap, I still got out of the rut at about the same time. If I took a break or if I shot through it.
Yeah.
And I would rather make photos, even if I think they're crap at the time.
Yeah.
Because like now that 1 year that I shot through it all, like I learned so much from the mistakes I made that I thought were crappy. It gave birth to new ideas for future photos. Yeah. So, it's just so damn important to set aside time for your creativity, for yourself.
Yeah, that's super important. Dude, so good. I feel like we tapped a lot of what Jacob is all about, and I'm glad we opened it up a little bit. I just want to know kind of one last practical question. You know, so like we mentioned, you've been traveling and stuff like that. How has that worked for you practically? Even just for fun, just kind of sharing, like, how does Jacob do it, right? So, you know, you've got 20 weddings this year, and maybe you have a little bit less, maybe you have a little bit more. Like, you know, are you kind of running everything while you're traveling during the weeks, and then you're just trying to be back wherever you need to be in time for a certain shoot, whether it's a wedding or engagement session? Do you have any boundaries where you say, hey, if I'm on the road, I'm not taking anything back home? And I know you just moved kind of back to St. Louis for a little bit. Like, what are some of Jacob's like rules and boundaries that you're working on right in that? How does that work for you so that you can have free time just to fish or do whatever you want and have the benefits? Because I feel like some people want to car camp, and it'd be nerve wracking if it's like, oh, I have this week off, but I have to be back for 2 sessions at a wedding next week.
Sure. Yeah.
Or did you plan that?
Yeah, so with travel, I definitely, like, I got a wedding inquiry on the road the other day, right? And it was for a wedding in June this year, and I had a wedding, like, they had 2 dates picked out, and on one of the dates, like, I had to be in another state the morning after their wedding, and their wedding's in a completely different state. So I had to tell them, like, I can do this date, but I can't do this one. So like even for regular bookings, like if I'm on the road and like they want to book a family session back home in like, a week's time, and I'm out and I drove out to Portland, like I'm going to tell them, hey, I can't do next week. Cause I never want to be in a rush like that ever.
Yeah.
Because it's too much, it's too much pressure, and it's unnecessary pressure. Like it's okay to say no. Cause you don't even have to say no. You can say, hey, well, I can't do that date, I can do these dates. You offer them a compromise, a solution. And if that doesn't work for them, then that's okay. Say, hey, I can give you some referrals. I just can't be under that much pressure to make sure I'm there when I'm 2,000 miles away.
Yeah.
On the other side of the country. So yeah, like I don't have really any set boundaries. I think that stuff just goes with just using common sense, really, right? And it also ties into what your definition of failure and success is. Like I'm the type of person where, like I'm getting ready to move to a lake away from St. Louis and live the fishing life for at least a year. Because I'm not the type of person that needs to bring in $100,000 a year and have all this stuff. Like, I just want to get by and save a little. Like, that's the kind of person I am. So, if it's an opportunity that comes up and I really want it, I'm definitely going to chase after it. But if, say I had something previously planned and it's like a day after, and I'm fully comfortable with saying no, it's not going to work out. I think for me these days, man, it all goes back to like deathbed questions, where it's like at the end of my life, I don't want to look back and say I was the type of hustler that, like, I don't even remember sleeping or hanging out with friends or enjoying life. When I'm on my deathbed, like I kind of turn this into a saying, like, if I'm on my deathbed thinking about Instagram, like I've already been dead for a long time.
I love that.
Like it's just being present is so much more important to me these days. And I think that's what a lot of people go through, and they come to kind of a realization of what they need to do to reach their goals, and hopefully realize that, guess what? Like you should, I think most of us want to develop a lifestyle to where we don't have to be working 70, 80 hours a week. That's why outsourcing is really big right now, because people are like, oh my God, I can go to dinner with my friends now because I outsource my editing. That's huge.
Right.
I mean, that's life, I remember listening to an audiobook by Gary Vee, and I remember he's got some great stuff, but he's got some other stuff too, where I'm like, dude, you're answering emails at 4 a.m. Like, that's how you're hustling and stuff. Like, I don't want to be up at 4 a.m. answering emails. Like, sorry.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? Like that. No, thanks. I want to be sleeping or waking up to get on the boat to go fishing, or waking up for golf or something. Like, I'm not answering emails at 4 a.m.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. There's an old story, I forget where I heard it, where it's there's a guy on a deserted island, and all he does all day is fish, cook, eat, and sleep. And he only catches what he needs, he only eats what he needs, and he only cooks what he needs. And then does the same thing every day. And I think the story is that, like, a businessman came to the island and said, hey, what are you doing? Like, why don't you use 2 poles or 2 nets, and you could catch double the fish, and then you could sell it, and then, you could build your business. And then the native guy says, well, then what? And then he's like, well, then you could get 3 poles and 3 nets, and you could triple. And they kind of keep going this rigmarole until the end. And then the native guy asks, and he says, all right, so now, let's pretend I caught all the fish and I'm the greatest fisherman of all time here on this island. Well, then what? And he's like, well, then you could just hang out on the beach all day and just cook and eat and fish whenever you want. And he's like, and the story is kind of like he was already doing that. And it's like this,
right.
this contentedness. I think about that all the time. It's like the balance of, especially recently, and you could tell from the last few episodes how a lot of them have been on like finance, but also not like fun finance, more like, hey, how do you plan for retirement? Like, how do we balance that with also like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, exactly. I want to have fun now. And it's such a good point. It's like, hey, do you run your business and you work your freaking face off now? And I don't know what the best answer is, right? Like we just mentioned, like for Gary Vee, hey, that's his. For you, that's you. For me, it's me. But
yeah, exactly. I don't think there is there's so many different ways that people perceive the definition of the word hustle that's been going around the past few years, and it's just like, it's not any of them are really bad. It's just like, yeah, like you said, it all depends on the person and the workload they want.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever want to have 30 weddings a year because that's just not me. Like I don't want that amount of work. Yeah, I can shoot half of that and be just fine.
Right.
But yeah, that's because of the lifestyle that I'm starting to create for myself. Right. Like that's what I know I want, and that's what I want to handle.
Yeah. I think people too, it's obviously, it makes a good case for you. Is like, be like, oh, Jacob only shoots 20 weddings a year. Like, I think people think I'm in the middle because I shoot like 35 to 40 right now. And I think ideally I'd like to get that number down, but I'm still in that figuring that out zone. And
sure.
It's just hard to say no. Let's pretend it. I've been fortunate the past 2 years. It's been like pretty great couples coming in and they're like, yeah, we want to make this happen. But hey, do we have as much inspiration? Are we as filled up as an artist as Jacob is, or filled up as whatever? If you want to spend more time doing, I feel like a lot of freelancers, we're taking a lot of time here, but a lot of freelancers like us, what they'll do is they will work their asses off and then they'll try and find a new hobby. And, you got to do what you got to do for your family and your bank account, whatever you have to do for that. But I think there's like, what if you can just have both? And again, it goes back to that ratio, right? Of like, maybe Jacob is 90% artist, 10% business, and some of us are the opposite, or finding that ratio. And I don't know what my main point is there. Is just, I guess, like you're
well, no, like I totally get what you're touching on, because my whole idea, like even since I started this, especially after I attended Sam's workshop, was like, yeah, I'm not the type of person that is going to be sitting there answering emails at 4 or 5 in the morning. Like that's just not me. That's not anything I want. But at the same time, like I also don't want to overload myself, because then like with my personality and mindset, like this will turn into just a job for me. And if I want just a job, like I'll go work for someone else again and let them handle taxes and healthcare and all that crap, like I'll happily go work for someone else again.
Right.
So I think like this also kind of keeps me a little more fresh for my mind, is where I don't have this huge season of where it will lead to burnout for my mind.
Yeah.
For the way that I work.
Yeah. And your lifestyle doesn't force you to have to make that happen, which is great. I think some people are like nervous about that, but it's like, hey, if you lived in St. Louis or somewhere where cost of living is not as high,
big time,
you can have what you want for less. And even if you have to travel, like if you have to drive to a New York City wedding once a month, even for you, like that's not that bad. That's not that bad. Let's say you pull home 5 to 8, 10K, and you're like, oh, in St. Louis that can go far, and it's not a bad recipe, like, oh, I get to fish 3 out of 4 weeks a year.
Like I've told so many of my friends that shoot like I had a few that like live in like the Bay Area, right? Like super expensive, and like they shoot 20 destination weddings a year, and like out of the 20, 2 of them are in the Bay Area. And I'm like, man, what? Like it obviously not the people with families and stuff, because they've already started to plant their roots there. Yeah. But like the people like me that are single and don't have any reason to actually be there, I'm like, my God, move to the Midwest for 2 years, and like you charge the same amount, but your savings will just like exponentially grow.
Yeah, 100%.
So massive. Like I'm getting ready to live on a lake for, including utilities, at this 500 square foot lake unit for less than $600 a month.
Oh my
covers
goodness.
Everything there. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like my mortgage up here in St. Louis, this townhouse that I'm getting rid of, is like, it's about $600 a month.
Oh,
less utilities, less condo fees, less. So I tell people like, hey, if you're in the position where you can, it doesn't really matter where you live, and you want to shoot destination weddings, like find a cost of living. You know, there's tons of cool cities in the Midwest here. Like, like Win Wiley's brilliant, right? Like he lives in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like it's a great city. Omaha's great. Kansas City is amazing. Like, and it's all these super low cost of living places. Yeah. And if most of your work isn't in your local area, then yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, and if you're
Move to the Midwest.
willing to drive, you know, at least like don't blow it on flights, kids.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I love it, man. Thank you so much. I know we got to get out of here because you got to get to moving in, and I got to go ride the motorcycle. It's a nice day. Where can people go to say hi and just say thanks for this inspirational talk on creativity, man? I know you're not a business guy. I wouldn't say like, hey, where can people go check out your presets? Like they're gonna know once they follow you. But like, where's the best place for them to just say hey?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram these days. So you can just go to it's just Instagram.com/Jacob_Loafman. So Jacob_Loafman is my main handle. And then like my email is just Jacob@JacobLoafman.com. Like I answer all emails as quick as I can. So, and I think it's very important to interact with people. On Instagram, if I don't follow you, if it goes in that other messages folder, I'm trying to get better at looking at those, but I'm actually just Instagram messages in general. I'm pretty bad at it admittedly. Like even if it shows that I read it, like most time I didn't read it. I'm just one of those OCD types that just like, oh, I have a new message. I click on it and then go back.
Yeah, get rid of the red bubble.
Shut my phone down. Like yeah, like I feel like such a piece of crap sometimes because I'm like, oh my God, this person sent me a message 6 days ago and like it's been sitting here. I feel terrible, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the best two places to find me these days, just Instagram or my email.
I love it.
And yeah, I'm a pretty open book guy. So like I'm always up for discussing anything really.
Awesome. Thanks so much for everything, Jacob.
Hey, thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.
That was awesome. Might be the record for our longest episode on the Bearded Talk. I'm not sure, but I feel like Jacob's one of those people where, again, I could just talk to him forever. There's something about, we talk about business all the time on this podcast, but there's something about flexing those creative muscles and making it part of your business. I know a lot of photographers, one we had on here, Sarah Bradshaw, she does like a color theory project every month. And it's to help just flex that muscle and try something new and help re-fall in love with photography again. And so if that's something that you needed or this episode resonated with you, then you're welcome. No, Jacob's awesome. And so he is just the man. One little thing I want to remind you guys again, we have been pushing the Patreon for fun. For those who just want to see under the hood of what it's like to run a photography business, obviously the podcast is the number one place for that. But we do have a Patreon and some recent things that we put out. One, we put out how I call my sessions. And so you can see me live call an engagement session, which might be kind of boring for some people, but if you're just curious about how things get organized and some little tips and tricks just to make it fast, the app I use, and that might help a little bit. And then two, we launched the first of many videos on SEO. So this is kind of like an all-around explainer. This will kind of help you beef up the posts that you already have and hopefully get you ranking and get people finding you and ideally, flex those creative muscles. So go check out the Patreon. The link is in the show notes as well as the Instagram to follow Jacob and tell him that you loved the episode, which you should. Thank you guys so much for everything. It's incredible how far this podcast has come, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Keep being awesome.